Good afternoon, and welcome to Perivale Wood. Welcome to another broadcast here on YouTube and another broadcast for 30 Days Wild, which we'll talk about a little bit. It's a project basically encouraging people every day in June for 30 days to get out and do something to engage with the natural world. And last night I was down here, I had some moth survey equipment out. Found various moths, which I've held up a few examples of, which we'll go and have a look at. So I'm just going to walk outside and we'll do that outside. Let's turn the camera around. And we'll have a look at one or two, or three or four, or even more of the different moth species that we found. So I will go through these. They're going to stay in pots in the main because we want to have a look at them later. But the first species here is called the orange Footman. It's a species which has become much more common in recent years. Rather than attractive, I say. Okay, so orange Footman, fairly common species. And another fairly attractive one here. This is a clouded border. These were all attracted to light traps that I was running here in Perivale Wood last night. This is rather an attractive one. You can see the patterns here are sort of a protective camouflage. When this is resting up during the day, it just looks like light shining through some dappled shadows. It just breaks up the image, makes it harder for anything hunting for it or looking to eat it to see that there's actually something here worth eating. So a clouded border. Very common moth of the grassland here is a straw dot. You can kick these up by day if you're walking through grassland like the meadows up there. But this one did come to one of the light traps I was running last night. And is again a pretty common species, but rather attractive in its own way. That brownish spot, which if you really zoom in with a proper lens, has a little bit of purple in it as well. This species is one called the Engrailed Clay. Again, it's a very common species, quite variable, but once you get your eye in, they become fairly distinctive. You can pick them out. But the patterns of engrailed clay can vary quite a lot. I'm not spending a lot of time in this one just talking about the ecology of these moths. We're just going through and having a look at them. It's a common white wave. It's white, it's got these lines across them which are fairly straight and fairly black, which distinguishes it from the similar common wave, which is rather similar but has slightly more brownish lines and slightly more curved lines. Again, another common species. Everything so far is common. This, no, that's not a very good pot, is it? Rather a dirty pot. You might be able to... Oops, just fighting with the gimbal. There we go. A small square spot. Another very common species. And here is one that goes by the name of the beautiful hook tip. You can see the hook tip bits, those hooky shaped ends to the wings there, rather scalloped edging. And, well, I think beautiful is legitimate. Rather an attractive creature. Again, probably disguising itself a little bit as, you know, a bit of dead leaf or something. That's what that would look like if it was sitting up somewhere, safe from being predated, because nothing would be able to see it. What else have we got in here? Okay, it seems to be sitting still, so let's see if we can look down into the pot at this one. This is a treble brown spot. And with some imagination you can see that brown line on the outside is broken into 3 separate bits, hence the treble brown spot. Again, all of these are common species, all of them came to light here. Here's rather an interesting species, again showing some of this camouflage that we were talking about. So this is a buff tip moth, a species that, as you can see, has a fairly good resemblance to a piece of a birch twig. So if that was sitting up there on a tree, looking just like a bit of broken twig, probably nothing would be able to see it and find it to eat it. Let me put that down there for a second. And you see end on there. If it wasn't for the fact it was moving, that would just look like a bit of twig. Few more to look at. Oops. I'll let this one out as well, it seems to be behaving itself. Oops. And this is a white ermine moth. I guess white with spots looking a bit like the fabric ermine, hence the name. And again, rather a common species, rather an attractive species. Seeing what else there is to look at here. Another one I'll keep in the pot here. This is a mottled mottled beauty. Getting my names wrong now. There's this sort of attractive zigzag line on the outer and slightly scalloped edging again. Just suggests that's what that is. Then I'll just go and get 1 or 2 more that I've still got chilling in the fridge. So I'll just leave the camera here whilst I go and do that. We'll focus down on focusing on the buff tip moth whilst I go and get 1 or 2 more. Right, back, 1 or 2 more moths to look at. We'll just zoom back out and resume where we were. So what else have I got to look at? Just go up here for a second. So just before we look at some more adult moths, I did actually find a caterpillar last night as well. Let me see if I can find this caterpillar, which I'm now trying to rear on. Ah, there it is. So this is the caterpillar of the vapour moth. A rather attractive punk hairstyle and lots of hairs and feathers. And this is an interesting species as an adult moth because the females of this species don't have wings. So you don't see them flying around. So I'm kind of hoping if I rear this through, this will prove to be a female because I've never I don't think, seen the female of this species, only the males. So hopefully that will prove to be a female caterpillar, about 50-50 of course, and if it is, that'll be interesting to see. So I'm going to rear that on, and then one or two more moths to look at from last night. Let me have a look in here. So this one is quite a famous moth, famous type of moth. This is a peppered moth, and this was one of the moths, the species of moth that provided the early evidence, or some of the early evidence, for the occurrence of evolution. So the moth occurred in this form, this white speckled form, and with the advent of industrialisation in Britain, a lot more soot and pollution meant that the trees that the moths were sitting on were no longer quite light coloured with some black spotting, but were dark. And so another form of this moth, which is much darker in colour, became increasingly common. And then as we've improved our air quality, we've got rid of a lot of that pollution. This white speckled form has again become the predominant form of this moth, and this is the one I see much more often than the dark form these days. So peppered moth, quite a famous moth in the history of science, that species. Another rather attractive little species here in this pot. This is a lime speck pug. The pug moths are quite a notoriously difficult group to identify, but the lime speck is one of the distinctive ones. At least here in Britain, there's nothing really like it, so if you see this, you know what it is. And then probably one last moth, nice, distinctive, large moth, because we always like to end on a hawk moth when you do these broadcasts because they're impressive. And this is a lime hawk moth. It's a common moth, particularly in urban areas, that can use the limes that are planted as street trees, and they usually, if you encourage them slightly, will behave and sit nicely on the hand. So we'll take this and we'll just pose it somewhere so we've got a nice view to end on. Come on, up you come. There we go. So that's a rather impressive species, I think. I say it's very common to see these reasonable numbers every year, sorry. So May, June, July time mainly. But rather nice. And so that's probably a good one to end on this little quick zip through some of the moths that we surveyed last night.